whatever door she went through?
No.
That's what I would have done.
I thought about resetting her laptop screensaver to that one where like it randomly comes off and it's just like a weeping angel like right in front of you. I'm like, I probably shouldn't do this too much. There's such a thing as being too evil to your children, right?
I don't know. My daughter's hooked on Westworld right now. I don't know if that's good parenting or not.
I haven't even actually seen that.
How far in is she?
We are second episode of season 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that how many episodes in season 2 have been released?
2.
You could have just said that you were caught up, man. I was like, I didn't realize it had that. It's been out that long.
It's foreshadowing.
Okie dokie.
Oh, by the way, you wanted a impression of Shrek the Musical Junior. It's really cool. The kids really enjoyed it. So if you're thinking about doing it, I would recommend it.
All right, I will let Caroline know. Was it? Does it follow the plot of like any of the movies, like the first movie, or
the
is
first
it just,
one? It
is. Okay. And did you said they did Shrek Junior? Was that similar to like?
They did a Shrek the Musical, but it's like half that. So it's like it's just about an hour. You know, it's condensed, but
okay. So it was a condensed version. I was gonna say, man, like Shrek Junior, like. How would they make it like school appropriate or appropriate for kids? It's like already like a G-rated or PG-rated show.
They just made it shorter so it's easier for the kids to remember their lines and sing it and everything.
Yeah, it's as long as they never do MASH. Our high school did that. That was a disaster.
MASH?
MASH the musical, huh?
Wow, considering that was a pretty anti-authoritarian movie. Yeah, I can see.
Well, it was more of the issue of this was a play that required a good 20-30 kids to do, and they had 5, so kids were just randomly being like 7 roles in a scene.
Oh, that's really awkward. Like, Caroline has the kind of the opposite problem. Like they always get a ton of awesome kids. And like it's tough in casting because there's almost always like as many understudies as there are like main actors. So yeah, they're always looking for the big casts.
You see, that was the bad one. Is they also did the dress rehearsal or whatever in front of the entire middle school. Who MASH is totally relevant.
It's gonna go over their head. Yeah, they're not even gonna know the historical basis of it, let alone get any of the jokes or references.
Not to mention that the original movie was basically a slam against Vietnam. I mean, the Korean War was just a convenient backdrop to hide the fact.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing is like it wasn't even actually a coherent story. It was just like random scenes from the television series that were supposedly funny.
Yeah.
So, we all got back to our classrooms, and my students were just like, "What were we watching, Mr. Dennison?" I'm like, "I don't even know."
Like, I don't know either. It's bad.
Like, I stayed awake. That was all you could really ask of me.
Yeah.
And rumor has it next year they're going to try a Little Shop of Horrors.
Ooh, that's always popular. Man. That's a classic.
Did you hear about the scientist that does that? She like joined MIT and gets like all the staff to do a musical once a year. And they did Little Shop of Horrors, and when they looked at like building the plant monster or whatever at the directions that the woman had gotten for the musical, they're just like, nah, we could do better. And so they have like a fully animatronic like controlled plant
as like
built from robot class,
exactly.
Biologically sound design.
Yeah, no, it was like all the
botanist design
like, it. Yeah, we can do this. We can do this a lot better.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. I see, Andy, you've got a review slapped in there. So looking forward to hearing about this. I think Trent might have some things to say about it. I'm looking forward to your review as well, Trent. Actually, no. I I actually don't know anything about your review, Trent. I know yours, TC. I mistook your guys' names. I didn't read them in the right order. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about Hands in the Sea.
Oh, yeah. I finally got to play that. Actually, I will talk about later.
Okie dokie. All right, well, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host, Joe Salen. I'm joined tonight by all 3 of my wonderful co-hosts, my beautiful co-hosts, starting with Andy Dennison. How you doing, Andy?
Better.
Recovering. Recovering from some bronchial difficulties.
Yeah, breathe deep, my friend. Breathe
Sounds
deep.
good, man. I haven't heard you cough yet, so that's good.
No, it's getting better. My review will be, what did I cough up in the last 2 days?
What's in my phlegm?
Spoiler, still more fun to play with than exploding kittens.
Nice. All right. And you already heard him. He just came back from Shrek the Musical. That's TC Reed.
Junior, Shrek the Musical, Junior.
Shrek.
Yes, I had no weekend. It basically was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then back to work.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was Monday. I realized I had to edit a Longview podcast. I was like, oh, crap. And I got that to you.
Yeah, the nick of time. I actually still need to upload that. I was in the process of it. So, we'll be taking care of that, TC. TC and I do the Longview. If you've never checked out that podcast, go check it out. It's taking a look at a single game for a good enough time to at least get a good look at it. Usually about an hour and a half, we talk about a single game. And you haven't heard from him yet. Hopefully he hasn't fallen asleep because tonight we are recording after Taekwondo practice, and that's Trent Ham. How you doing, Trent?
Hey, I'm here. I'm pretty good.
All right. Well, we talk about board games here on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. We first review games. We'll talk about our board gaming burnout, things that drive us crazy, which is coming from TC. So he has some splaining to do.
Oh,
and
I just had a bad day. I just wanted to rail.
Well, we will hear about that later. First, let's go ahead and hear from Trent before he passes out, where he's going to be reviewing the Iron Curtain.
Okay, so Iron Curtain is the 3rd game in a trilogy, and I'm willing to bet, Joe, you've heard of the other 2, 13 Days and 13 Minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
They did 13 minutes too. I didn't know they did that.
This is Iron Curtain is like is a part of that trilogy. It's intended to basically be like a lighter Twilight Struggle. It's a game that's supposed to reenact part of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like 13 Days and 13 Minutes really focused on the Cuban Missile Crisis, whereas Iron Curtain more is about the broader Cold War in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think 13 Days I felt like focused on 1962 as a year, whereas 13 Minutes focused exactly on that moment of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Whereas Iron Curtain is more about the whole Cold War, kind of in broad sense. And they all kind of are short, and they all come together, and I will give a quick comparative review at the end of this. But I want to talk about Iron Curtain, which I played repetitively over the weekend. I played it several times.
Not a tough game to do that with, huh?
No, it takes about 15 minutes on ballparking. It's short. It's like 13 minutes in length almost. Haha.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so the game is basically you start off with a card on the table, and you're either playing the red team, the Russians, or the blue team, the Americans. It's the Cold War. And basically that means you have a big handful of cubes. And a card starts off on the table that says Europe on it. And it has a red cube and a blue cube on it. And every cube is supposed to represent some influence. You have a hand of 5 cards, okay? And it comes out of this, the deck. The game consists of, let me count for a second, a deck of 20 cards plus that generic Europe card you start with.
Mm-hmm.
And you start off with a quarter of the deck in your hand, so does your opponent. And all the cards on it depict either a U.S. flag or an American flag, or a U.S. flag or a USSR flag. And then it also has an ability on it and a number of cubes on it. And it also indicates a region of the world, like Europe, Asia, South America, Africa. I think they're all continents. I think there's a Central America one too. They're all like regions. And what happens is you're essentially, as you're playing this game, you're trying to control regions of the board as it comes together. But the board is more abstract because it's made out of cards as you play them. The game is all about adjacent cards. So if there's a Europe card on the end table, and you have a card representing the Europe region in your hand, you have to play it adjacent to one of the Europe cards that's already on the board. If you're starting a new region, you can start it anywhere. So the map, it doesn't end up really looking like a map. It's just cards that are adjacent to each other on the table. So you're playing these out, and when all the Europe cards get played, and it says how many there are on each card, I think there's 6 Europe cards. When Europe is completed, you score the region. You get a point for every single card on which you have more cubes than the other player. And then you also get a bonus point or 2, also indicated on the cards, for being the person that controls the most regions in Europe. You know, each of the cards representing a region in Europe, like Poland or Italy or whatever. And it has like a track, like a Twilight Struggle-esque track that goes along with it, that basically, if it gets to the Russian end of it, the Russian win. If it gets to the American end of it, the Americans win. So if you control more of Europe than the Russians, and you're the Americans, the counter on that track is going to move towards you. And if it ever gets all the way to the end, you win. So you're just alternating turns playing cards. During the first half of the game, you each play 4 cards, and the 5th card gets laid over to the side to be resolved at the end of the game. It's face down. And then you deal out the rest of the deck, and you play those 5. If the game, usually, every time but one I played it, it ended at some point during the game with someone ending the track on their side. If it ever gets down to the point where that doesn't happen, you get to an end game, and whoever has theirs slightly tilted in their favor is the winner. And all of the cards have a special ability on them. A lot of them are adjacency based. So they'll say, like, when you put this card down, you can steal a cube from an adjacent card and move it on there. It can be either color. I mean, there are all sorts of variations on the powers. And then it also has a number of cubes that you place on it when you play the card. So if I play a card and it has 2 cubes marked on it, I get to put 2 of my cubes on there. But if it has a flag of the other player, they get to do the ability. If it has my flag on it, I have to either choose the cubes or the ability. So you're basically just alternating playing 9 cards throughout this game, and the 10th one that's face down from both players resolves at the end of the game. And that's it. That's the whole game. It literally takes 10 or 15 minutes. And it's all about adjacency and placement, and you kind of want to hold on to cards until you can get a situation where, like, I can place this card, and if I wait a little bit, I can steal 3 or 4 cubes from adjacent cards. Or I can move cubes around on the board or things like that. And so it's all about timing when to play the cards and such like that. The only problem I had with the game is it's a great little short filler. The only problem I had with the game is there are definitely some cards that are better than others. And with such a small deck, sometimes one player can get most of the good cards and just win. Which is something I really didn't like. I felt like if this game had been slightly worked on more, and both players had a similar starting deck of cards with very balanced powers, this would have been a great game. But I feel like the randomness of it and the fact that the cards are definitely not equal sometimes mean that one player just wins. And so in my opinion, this is the weakest of the trilogy. I really like 13 Days. I'm mad on 13 Minutes, and I really didn't like this one much at all. I keep out of the trilogy. The only one staying in my collection is 13 Days, because I thought that one was quite fun. It also happens to be the longest and probably the most complex. But I gotta say, Iron Curtain really looks nice components, plays really quick, has a nice theme. But there's problems with the gameplay that upon repeated play, I have no interest in ever playing it again. And I don't think the person I was playing it with does either. That's 13 Days or Iron Curtain. 13 Days is great. I'm reviewing Iron Curtain. Not good.
Yeah, so have you played 13 Minutes?
Yes.
How was that one?
He said that it was meh.
It was meh. It was meh. So it kind of all goes downhill, right?
I think they progressively got worse throughout the trilogy. I think 13 Days is where it peaked. Okay. I like 13 Days quite a bit as a short Twilight Struggle. These other two were just... They both got various issues that I didn't like, but I especially didn't like Iron Curtain.
Might be trying to distill Twilight Struggle down more than you can really distill it.
Yeah, I think 13 Days is about as far down as you should be trying to distill it. If you distill it too much, you just end up with people playing OP cards and the game is over.
Yeah. I played a NATO card round one time.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of Iron Curtain, but I wanted to review it because I really like Twilight Struggle and I like 13 Days quite a bit. Those are both much more highly recommended.
That makes sense. All right, well, thanks, Trent. I was kind of wondering, I do want to give these ones a shot because that sort of micro game, like there are certain concessions I'm willing to make in that sort of micro game environment. But what you've described sounds like a lot of it can be kind of almost playing out as in a specific way because of how OP some of the cards end up in your starting hand.
Yeah, I always have comparing games like this to other games I've played that are like a deck of cards or smaller, and there are many others I'd rather play. I mean, if you want a 2-player fun war game with a deck of cards sized, play like Battle for Hill 218. That one's great.
Oh, I have that one. I need to try it.
I like that one quite a bit. That one's very good. This one's not. And that's obviously, this is like, if this sounded remotely interesting to you at all, but you're hesitating because of my negative review, go play Battle of Hill 218. Which is like same idea of a war game with adjacency cards and stuff like that, but done way better. It's like way better than this.
You said it's called Battle for Hill 218?
Yep.
Yeah, I have that one. I won't play it. Plus,
Yeah,
all right.
It's in an appropriate sized box.
Yeah. It's literally packaged like a deck of cards as it should be. I mean, Battle for Hill 218 is. Iron Curtain's box is unnecessarily large.
Yeah, it's like Machi Koro bad.
Wow, that's awful. All right, well, thanks, Trent. Let's go ahead and hear from TC about another 2-player war game. This one's on a different scale, though, and in a different time period.
Yeah, whereas Iron Curtain's the Cold War, I'm going to talk about Hands in the Sea, which is the Punic War, Rome versus Carthage. I can't talk tonight. 264 to 241 BC. The reason I wanted to try this one is because we had someone on the long view actually talk about it at length, and it really piqued my attention. So I went over to my friend Steven's house, and I look in his basement. He has like a copy collecting dust on the shelf. I was like, why have you told me? Maybe told me you've had this. Well, just like so, we ripped it off the shelf and we played it. And if you're at all familiar with A Few Acres of Snow, this will just fit like a glove. It's a very, very interesting take on the system. What's different about it is that, of course, it's a completely different time period. Instead of being the French and Indian War, you're playing Rome and Carthage, and you've got boats, and you've got, you still got the same mechanics where you're drawing a deck of cards. You're trying to figure out what to do. You're trying to put things out on the board. You're also trying to get an army going. Unlike Few Acres of Snow, money's a little bit more fluid in this one, but it's about the same length of game. It plays in about 90 minutes, and that was a learning game. What was really interesting about this one is like the main chunk of the game is Sicily. You're just beating the crap out of each other in Sicily. And if you can ever completely take over all the territory in Sicily, you've won, which from what I can gather reading the history is pretty historic. There is a lot going on in this game. There's events you can do. There's communal cards you can pick up that rotate through. The battle system is like Few Acres of Snow, except when it comes to naval battles, you're rolling dice, and hits us are on 5s and 6s, which I'm sure is going to be Joe's favorite mechanic of all time.
Oh yeah,
but still, it was a very unique take on that system. And after playing like Martin Wallace's other takes on that system, like Mythotopia and was it a Handful of Stars, I think was the third one in that. And playing this, I'm like, this would actually seem like a more natural evolution of that system, a 2-player war game. I don't know if it's in print or not. I played a Kickstarter copy that came with an expansion we didn't try out. The pieces are really cool, but I think those were Kickstarter exclusives. I don't know. I'm gonna be ranting on Kickstarter later anyway. But for what it's worth, my first initial play, Hands in the Sea, seems very solid, and I'm really looking forward to getting a few more games of this in. So if you liked A Few Acres of Snow and you want to try a different take on it, I can strongly recommend Hands in the Sea.
Well, I'm really interested in trying this one, but I have nothing extra to share from when we talked about this on the long view. I really think Jonathan did a great job of telling us all about the historical basis and how the game, even though it does involve these random events, that the way that it sort of shakes out in the long run actually makes for a kind of crunchier, deeper game that certainly pleases wargamers in a different way than, whereas A Few Acres of Snow kind of like bridges the gap between War and Euro. It definitely placates the heavy wargamer crew in many ways. So I'm interested in this. I'd like to hear, though, from Trent and Andy. Have you guys ever given this one a shot yet?
Nope.
Nope.
I have not played. I'm trying to think that was it this one? I don't know. I don't want to diss out. I thought I'd heard somewhere that it was like some people didn't like it as much as A Few Acres of Snow or something like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's. I mean, to a certain extent, I think for your crew, your crowd, because a lot of people are like this, where they only get to play games like once, 2, 3 times. I think that your first blush impression is not going to necessarily please the same crowd, but I think that they both offer the ability to sink your teeth into and to find a lot more there than meets the eye, which is what initially interested me much about Few Acres of Snow, and I love that game. And now it's sort of the idea of Hands in the Sea seems really cool, and I'm looking to track it down. So anyway,
I backed the Kickstarter, but I have not received it.
Oh, okay, so it's still in the process of shipping.
Man, I'll tell you what though. There's as Carthage, you can get elephants, and you just roll a die, and that's how much additional damage they do. I had elephants all up in my junk in Sicily. They were tearing me up. It was actually pretty cool.
All right. Well, thanks, TC. That was Hands in the Sea. All right, let's go ahead and hear from Andy now, who's going to be telling us about a game that I don't think – I feel like it hasn't been talked about enough for how really crunchy this game can be. So I'll let you take it from there, Andy.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Glass Road, which is a Uwe Rosenberg game. This one actually, I haven't had a chance to play it a whole lot recently, but I think I'm now in like the 3rd or 4th play, and things are actually starting to click a little more. So like some things that I learned is you kind of play these cards. If somebody plays a similar card to you, then you're limited on what actions you can take. However, you can only play so many out of the like 5 cards you get. So what I was kind of figuring out is really what you want to do is try to pick like the 3 cards that will help you that you don't think anybody else is going to use, and then like the 2 cards that you think somebody else might pick based on what they're doing. I haven't quite got to that level with it yet, but I got my first, like, basically a good score. Like a guy I was playing with was like, no, that's a really competitive score. And I'm like, okay, things are making sense now. But it's very much what it felt like to me was it's kind of like Caverna in the sense that all the things are on the board and you have to kind of look through those and figure out what point buildings you're going to build. The other thing with it is that it's a much quicker game. It goes a lot faster than you think it's going to, so you really have to like narrow your focus, pick what you're going to do, and do it. Like there's not a whole lot of switching strategies or mid game. Oh, I'm going to do this instead because you don't have the time for that. You got to kind of pick the method you're going to go with and go with it. I think, Murder the wheels. Yeah, that my first game was just figuring out how the heck the wheel resource thing worked. It's definitely a little bit weirder. I think it might have been a way to save on components. I don't know, but it drove me a little bit batty to get it done. Now it all makes sense, but that took at least a play. And then it took about a play to figure out what I was doing with the dang cards. And now this last time, I'm like, oh, okay, so I do these cards in this way. And ultimately, I got to look at that board to see what chits are available, get a hold of that, and get scores with them.
Cool, yeah. All right, so Glass Road definitely has a lot to sink your teeth into. And so at 1 game or 2 games, I know that if people, depending on your preferences, I know that at 1 game or 2 game, it can really rub you in a specific way. Like it's, I've heard from newer players that are just like, they see how deep the system can really be. And it does have the building issue that Andy's talked about, but it also has buildings that are kind of randomized and they are distributed in a specific distribution so that there's like 4 of each of these types, like 4 scoring buildings, 4 one-time powerful use buildings, and then 4 sort of like early game. Well, not just early game, but like 4 anytime conversion buildings. And really that conversion reminds me of like Ora et Labora. So you end up kind of making a supply chain and then seeing how it can work, but you only do that for like 1 or 2 turns because there's only 4 turns in the game. So super quick. Trent, from what I remember, you were involved in another game of Glass Road as well?
Yes, I played a game with Andy on Saturday. I like Glass Road. I had just not played it in like 3 or 4 years. And it struck me initially as not a Rosenberg that I liked, but I quite enjoyed my play of it on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say about it. I got it a long time ago in a sale, and it's just kind of sat at my house and never been played, and been one of those that I keep thinking I should get rid of it, and then I never do. But now I'm kind of maybe rethinking that and want to play it a couple more times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those that I think is just going to stay in my collection forever. It doesn't feel like a Rosenberg game to me. Honestly, it has too many things it does different. I know that he was sort of playing around with the idea of a resource wheel, but in Ora et Labora, it's not really a resource wheel. It's more like just a more convenient way to handle the round by round accumulation spots that you'd find in Agricola or find in a kind of different form in Le Havre. But I really think that in Glass Road, he's done something to change the way the wheel functions so that you have some really tough decisions to make. Sometimes you'll accidentally produce a resource and that'll consume all these other resources that you actually needed to build because you're sort of like making glass and making brick, but also using the components of those two resources to craft other buildings that help you manipulate a spatial aspect on your player board. I think that it's just one of those games that has so many different things that are well realized in such a short amount of time that to me it's what I call like your energy shot of Euro, your 5-hour energy, and it just really is it fires on all cylinders for me. It's one of my top Rosenberg games, one of my top games. So I'm glad to hear, Trent, that your next game of it kind of went a little bit better. I know that the randomness of the buildings can kind of put some people off, but I do find that like you end up being able to make something out of what's there. It's not like the buildings are extremely balanced is what I think kind of works to sort of help that. So that's Glass Road. Hey, I know, TC, you haven't played many Uwe Rosenberg games, but I would say put this one towards the top of your list. Glass Road it's really unique. It's not going to feel like anything like his other games. If you play Feast for Odin, then you've played a game that kind of feels similar to Fields of Arla, in my opinion. I don't know. Like they've got very different feels to me, but I'm also a Rosenberg fan. I would say if you're going to play like one of the resource conversion ones, Glass Road is really the way to go, I think, to get in. And then you decide if that's for you and you can move up. So it's like there's different sort of like Uwe's design, very similar games from somebody who doesn't like them, just sees them all as like the same. But to me, like there's many different sort of categories of Uwe's games, and Glass Road sits as a pinnacle of whatever that is, and maybe on its own island. But I really, really like it. So I highly recommend that you try Glass Road.
Okay. Word. I'll write it down. Glass Road.
Yeah.
Check.
Alrighty. So that was Andy's review of Glass Road. And now I'm going to be moving into, a quick mention and then my actual review. So my quick mention is that I played a game of Lords of Waterdeep. We had tabletop day this last weekend. I got a chance to play several games, and Lords of Waterdeep was one that was starting, and I wanted to get a chance to play with somebody I hadn't played with in a while. And it was like, sure, I'll play Lords of Waterdeep. It's been a long time, and I don't remember being particularly impressed when I played it, but just it's fine, right? It was fine, and it was one that I wasn't like opposed to. And so we started playing Lords of Waterdeep without the expansion, without anything else. And in like the first round, I had 2 mandatory quests played on me, and it was just kind of it was like I was glad that as an experienced player that I was being affected, and kind of the 2 experienced players at the table ended up getting all the negative cards played towards them, while the other players, the 2 newer players that were learning, kind of got left alone. But when it comes down to it, Lords of Waterdeep is a game that attracts a crowd that plays Dungeons and Dragons games, but it's attracting them to more resource conversion Euro style games. But it really doesn't do anything spectacular or anything interesting from the perspective of somebody who enjoys that style of game. It is a simple recipe making game where you're just going to be taking quests that are recipes of different colors of cubes and maybe some money, and then you're going to be getting those cubes from different spots on the board. There are intrigue cards that you can play that will sometimes give you cubes and let you take cubes from other players, or have other players have the option to give you cubes for points, or sometimes you have to give out cubes. You actually don't take things from other players. The only thing you can do is put a quest on top of them. And these mandatory quests are essentially very sometimes costly and not as lucrative quests that are just kind of like clogging up your system. And they're not, they allow you to actually play on any player you want. So they're not like really like balancing out through the table. It is kind of very close to a direct interaction the game has. Anyway, the way that I felt during this game of Lords of Waterdeep was just very bored. There wasn't really much stuff that was going on here. I didn't feel like I was really on the edge of my seat waiting or hoping that something got taken. It was just that, I tried to get as many resources as I could, be as efficient as possible, and I felt like I was getting quests when they came up, but if a spot got taken before I got there, there's pretty much only one way to get mostly everything unless buildings have been built, which I guess that's the one thing this does that is interesting, is that the board expands, but players sort of decide how the board expands by drafting some buildings, and they'll have effects from those. So the buildings are the one sort of ray of light that shines through this otherwise game that's just full of darkness. One of the most disgusting board designs I can remember. I think that it looks worse than the board for Troyes, and Troyes has a reason to look that way because it's supposed to look medieval. Lords of Waterdeep just looks gross. It has no excuse for having such a gross drab board. It's a Dungeons and Dragons game. Why does it look so boring? So anyway, overall, the way that I felt during this game of Lords of Waterdeep was like, I understand that it's a great place to get people in, but it's a gateway game that I'm filing along with Settlers of Catan, where it's one that I will play only if I've had enough time to forget how much I really am not impressed by it. So that's my short take on Lords of Waterdeep. Anybody comments?
I'm assuming you didn't play it with the expansion.
No, and I know how the expansion works. I've played it with it before.
The expansion improves the game quite a bit. I don't like base game Lords of Waterdeep.
I don't like
the expansion.
Okay.
Unless there's corruption involved in Lords of Waterdeep, I do not want to play it.
You know what I do to people that make me play base game Lords of Waterdeep? They get all the mandatory quests.
This is for you. This is for you. Oh, guess what else is for you? This is for you.
Yep.
Joe, this is why I didn't get into that game of Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah, the mandatory quests, like the guy who owned the game was like, sometimes I've taken those out in the past. I really liked how the game played, but I just have them in there for now. And I was just kind of like, okay, that's fine, whatever. It made sense. The newer players played them on the experienced players, and the experienced players played them on each other. It was kind of a way for us to do a little bit of balancing, a little bit of handicapping, but it really wasn't anything else. So that's just kind of a partial review. I just wanted to say that before I talk about my actual review, which is Burgle Brothers, designed by Tim Fowers, who was on the podcast a few months ago or a couple months ago. And it was an interesting experience playing a cooperative game from Tim Fowers that in a way kind of feels like in that sort of you try to do things by getting an action allotment and then bad stuff happens, pandemic sort of archetype of cooperative games. What you're doing here is you're trying to, together as a group, loot different sort of, I guess they're called loot cards. So you're trying to loot different items from a museum or something like that. And there's security guards on each floor that move around, and they get more aggressive as you go up in floors. And they also get more aggressive the more time you spend on that floor, which is a cool little thematic way that these guards get a little bit more aggressive, but they're still pretty dumb because they're still like sort of seeing you and then going the opposite direction. So it definitely has a way that it works though within the game system. You put out some walls randomly, and then each person gets like a variable player power, of which there's like 9 in the game. There's a ton of them. And then there's an advanced variable player power for everyone that's already in the game. There's custom meeples. I mean, it's just really a beautiful, extremely fleshed out design. Like, to compare it to base Pandemic is really, it's really almost insulting because it's more on the lines of like Pandemic Rising Tide, where it blows the system to something totally different and adds a ton of unique powers, a ton of unique events. One thing that I really liked about Burgle Brothers is that as you are moving about sort of exploring a face down, like you're sort of exploring the museum as you go, and you don't know what's going to be where. There's mildly thematic rooms where like you walk into it and it's a fingerprint scanner, so you just automatically set off an alarm, whereas other ones have alarms where if you move through them, that's okay. You don't necessarily get set off an alarm. Some of them have cameras where if a guard is standing in a place where there's a camera, he can see and would set off an alarm, and all the other cameras, no matter where they are in the game, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, the way that the game is designed is really well thought out, extremely thoughtful design, great stuff. My favorite thing was that whenever you are the player who picks up a loot, if you're the one who cracks the safe, you pick up a loot. Oh, and cracking the safe is kind of similar to Forbidden Desert, where you have to sort of have the entire row and the entire column revealed before you can really do it. And so anyway, once you crack a safe, though, you're going to get a loot card. All these loot cards are hilarious of like malices that affect you. They're like the opposite of a bonus. They'll be like, you have an impediment that makes it difficult now for you to actually get any more loot. And so we ended up in this situation where the player that got 2 loot tokens just was really, he couldn't do the things he needed to do to to help us finally get that 3rd loot token and win the game. So I only played this once, so I don't really have a deeper way of putting this, but I think that it's just the amount of design that's here is crazy, and the fact that it fits into a box the size of paperback just blows my mind. You're talking about a game that feels like a full box $60 game, comes with the components of a $25 game, and is priced at about $40. Now, design-wise, you're getting way more than that $25 of components that it feels like I'm getting when I get a smaller box. But Tim Fowers could have easily put this in a box the size of Splendor or much larger, and nobody would have said there's not much game here. He could do it this small, so he did it, and I think that's really great, being able to pack your games, condense your games. It is certainly worth the price tag he's put on it. You should buy it from his website. Anyway, that's my review of Burgle Brothers. I was really impressed by it. I think that it's really, really cool. So I'm giving it sort of a bit of a stamp of approval here. I think that it would be a great entry level into Pandemic because it's a little bit more random. The way that the things work out, the way that the guards programmed movement is really random. But I really enjoyed this.
I completely concur. This was a huge hit with my family about a year ago, and I felt like it was a perfect middle step between Forbidden Desert and Pandemic.
Nice.
Like it fits right in between them is the kind of how I felt. Like if you want something that's a little more in deep than Forbidden Desert to play with your family, but you don't think they're quite at Pandemic yet, this is one to get.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I'd never thought of it as being in between those, but yeah, it feels also totally unique with its theme. And the artwork here I thought was fantastic.
It's very, and I hate to use this word, it's very fun. I hate to use that loaded word, but yeah, I appreciated the lightheartedness, I guess. The lightheartedness isn't quite right, but it's kind of right of the art. Like, it's just well done. It's well executed. I like how it's done.
Yeah, I agree. It's a class act from Tim Fowers. So that's Burgle Brothers. And I have some bad news for everybody who's listening right now live and just any listeners. Andy will not be joining us for the rest of this episode. And so RIP, man. Hope everything goes well for him. It sounds like things are okay, but his presence is needed elsewhere. So yes, shed a tear and a moment of silence as we go on to our topic section. So unfortunately, one man down.
One man down. I already ran someone off with my rant, and I haven't even started yet. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, hopefully everything goes well for him. Like thoughts and everything else, man. Thoughts, vibes, everything your way. So that's said to Andy, who obviously can't hear this. But anyway, let's hear from UTC. Why are we talking about burnout?
Burnout. Well, well, combine it with a bad few days at work or just a really stressful 2 days of work, and so I'm dealing with some choice people at a game store. What I basically brought this on was me and Kate have been enjoying our Munchkin collectible card game. We have been really playing it, enjoying it, and we've been like, hey, let's go out and show other people how to play, maybe go out. And so we went out and we were playing it. We're like, yeah, this is fun. We bought some boosters and we're having fun. We're looking at stuff and we're trying to get people involved. And we got some Magic players came up. And so I'm like describing it. And like, hey, here we go. You do this. And you tap this card. And the guy was like, oh, you can't, that's not tapping. I'm like, well, yeah, it's like Magic where you tap it. Like, well, you can't tap because that's copyrighted by Wizards of the Coast. So you have to, it's like, oh, well, okay, I guess that's what they call it, zapping, right? Like, well, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter. And so I was just like, it's just little things like that, just kind of drive you up the wall. and make you just like, oh, I want to quit this whole damn. I'm tired of being here. I'm tired of playing games. I'm trying to be nice. Right? Well, this is Munchkin. It can't be a good game. And you're zapping cards instead of tapping them. You can't call it tapping. I'm like, oh, I just want to punch someone right now. But I had my daughter, so I'd like put on my game face, right? I'm like, well, that's cool, whatever. We'll just go somewhere else, I guess. But it's just things like that, just
this guy was not sarcasm, right? This was not like
this was legitimate. Like, he was like, you can't call it tapping because Wizards of the Coast has a copyright on it. So I did this big looking up, and from what I can gather, Wizards of the Coast owns the copyright to the symbol for tapping. They own the copyright for the symbols for all their fire and all that stuff. And it looks like way back in the day, Wizards of the Coast tried to file a patent on collectible card games in general, back when everybody and their dog was doing it. But man, I'm like, really, can't you just sit here and enjoy the game? Like, maybe Munchkin is a good game. You don't know. Maybe no, it's like, oh, it just drove me, and it's just like, then remind me like, oh, this makes me mad. Oh, this makes me mad. And I just needed to rant about it. Guys, I need to rant.
No, sure. I mean, I'm just shocked that he wasn't joking. I feel like I've heard or made that joke. I don't think I've made that joke very much because I'm not a big Magic expert, but I'm pretty sure that I've heard that joke many times. And every time I hear it, it's kind of like, I mean, obviously they're making it not realizing that I've heard the joke like 50 times before. But to have somebody be serious about it,
like flat out legit about it.
What?
This guy was flat out legit about it. I'm like, well, I don't see you giving the Pokemon players a bunch of crap. And then I read that X-Wing's going to a second edition. I'm like, really? Really? More cash grab? Really? I'm going to take my games and just go home. So, yeah. So, and I got
do you want to know the real reason why X-Wing has gone second edition? There's a reason. It's hilarious.
Oh, please tell me. I need some humor right now.
Oh, it's because so you're supposed to build 100-point fleets in the game, right? And all the cards originally came with numbers pre-numbered on them. All those numbers are crap and way wrong. So what they did is they're making a second edition without those numbers on the card, and you have to go look them up in an app to build your thing.
Are you serious?
Yes.
They're going to charge money for the app?
That's the big change, and I am not kidding you.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I guess you can easily switch an app, whereas when you got cards, when it's not printed, a lot more you can do.
Yep, their original design of X, they had no idea what they were doing early on, so there's a lot of cards out there with really, really, really wrong numbers, especially the early ones. And so if we put everything in an app and don't actually put a number on the card, then we can change them at will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not the reason they gave. They said they're introducing force powers. I'm like, okay.
They could have done that in the old game.
Yeah.
Well, here's I guess things from what you're saying, TC. These are things that drive me crazy too. So I guess I got one, and this is just from what we talked about last time, which was with Seth Jaffe. The original Eminent Domain came with 3 types of ship, and everybody complained that there's no use for these other types of ship. And it's it was a component limitation where he decided to include stuff and didn't need to, hoping that maybe later on he could add something to it. But everybody looked at it this game's incomplete.
Yeah. And he flat out said the only reason he did it was because the mold came with all of it, right? It's well, it's the mold that's got all these ships. It'd be more expensive not to put them all in or not to make them. So what the heck? I'll just do it as a favor to people who bought the game. You can have these different ships and you can just use whichever ones you want. People are like, ah! I'm like, really? You do something nice and that's what you get? Nice.
Yeah, so no, nitpicking is, I think, the big thing that you're saying is something that just makes all of the energy just siphon from you, just drain out of you, and there's just nothing you can do but take yourself out of that situation. So, like you said, when somebody corrects your language and does it in a serious way, not in a joking way, yes, I can understand to be frustrated by that too. And I have great news.
It's Andy back.
I announced that Andy was not going to be joining us, and here he is. So, man, wow, already back from the grave. Andy, how's it going?
Not too bad.
Oh, still have the robotic voice, man.
Yeah, I'm going to probably have that no matter what.
No, you're good now. Whatever you just did, it's fine. I think that you got a chord, man. I think it's a chord. Because right now it was fine, but then when you were when you had your hands on the table, it was robotic. So whatever it is, I think Andy is channeling electricity through his hands, and this is like interfering with his microphone. Yes. Did you see like the new Marvel?
Distinctly possible. The last 2 times I've been to the store for groceries, the cart has literally shocked me every 30 seconds.
Andy is a small generator. We need to start harvesting you like the little sisters in BioShock. R.I.P. Never forget.
Okay, I want to get this back to the topic because when TC suggested this, I had something that immediately came to mind. Immediately. And I can sum it up with 2 letters, and those 2 letters are A and P. If you want to get me really frustrated at the gaming table, take way too long for every one of your turns, and I'll be ready to leave the game night and not come back, and I'm done. I get really tired of people that just take forever on their turns. I'm like, I want to kill you. But of course, maybe I've had an extreme. I played an almost 6-hour game of Terraforming Mars due to AP, so maybe.
The time that it's most frustrating to me is when, you know, like when you're trying to learn a game and like just the way some people process information, they cannot make a decision until they've heard every possible option. And a lot of times, what's most frustrating, I think, Trent, is when the AP, is because a player doesn't start thinking about what they're going to do until it's their turn, it can be really frustrating. Like, especially in an involved game, you need to be like considering that, because just moving the pieces, that's what makes it a 2 to 3 hour game on the box. They're not considering that the pieces in your head aren't moving in between your turns. So yeah, when people say there's a lot of downtime in a game, a lot of times that's because one player is being really selfish with the way they're budgeting their time. They're spending their time when it's not their turn doing things that are not considering what they're going to do on their next turn. Like, I understand people need to go to the restroom, things like that, but this is, you know, this is something where players need to be conscious of the fact that if you're playing an involved game, you need to have your turn decided or at least considered before it's your turn. And some games lend themselves to this worse than others. Like, obviously, sometimes it can be a game problem where it's like, too many things switch before it's your turn and you don't have the ability to really do much. And if that's the case, I probably am just going to dislike the game in general. But yeah, Trent, I think that definitely needs to be said. AP can really affect my impressions of a game. I try never to review a game that I've just had a very bad AP experience in. So that's, you know, if that gives you an idea, I feel like as a reviewer, it contaminates my experience. I'm no longer a representative sample. I think that can be a player issue, but hopefully with conscious players, it won't be quite as bad.
You know what's worse than that, Trent? Is when someone takes forever to make their turn and they finally do it, and then like 10 minutes later they go, "Oh, I didn't know that could happen. Can I take my turn back?" Mm-hmm. That's what blows me up. I'm like, no,
I will sometimes note when that happens to me, but I don't like taking my turn back in that situation. I'm like, oh crap, this is the first time I played it. I didn't know that could happen. But I don't want to take my turn back when that occurs. I'm usually just commenting on the game. Is like, that surprised me.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'd be like, no, I want to take my turn back. You didn't explain that could happen. I want to do that. I'm like the first time I played, what's that? Madeira? I can't pronounce it.
Madeira. Oh, yeah. God, how many turnbacks did they want in that one?
Well, I played it, and I kind of half listened to the rules. I'm like, okay, this is going to be one of the games you just do a bunch of crap and see what happens on your first game. And I didn't catch the fact that you didn't want pirate points. I thought pirate points would be awesome to get because they're pirate points. And you doesn't want to be a pirate. And I was like, dude, I'm going to get pirate points. And I just ran away with the pirate points. It's like, oh, minus 16 points. Oh, whoops. Now I know better next time.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be, I don't know. AP can be an issue. And the thing is, I think I can forgive it maybe once or twice in a game. If it's like a crucial, like if I screw this up, I'm losing. If I do it right, I should be able to win. Like taking a little extra time at that moment, like that's understandable. Unless you're like, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if you start getting to the 10, 15-minute mark, you're getting kind of ridiculous at that point. Or the lovely, like, you know, what's the trope in 18XX is, no, wait, like, I think I can get like $5 more if I just stare at this board for another 10 minutes.
Yeah.
How often does that work out?
I don't know. I know there's some groups I've heard about that they literally have like, they bought some kind of weird timer, but it's basically a cube, and each player has a face and it's like a chess clock.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah. I almost bought one.
And they'll do that for like 18xx games. Like, you have 5 minutes, go.
Yeah.
Well, what can really, I think,
in 5 minutes, then you lose your move. Done.
Well, something that was brought up in the chat here is that when you're learning a game for the first time, it's very difficult to plan ahead for your moves, and that's absolutely right. So the way that I would react to that is when I am learning a game for the first time, I like to think of it as like my experiment run. So everything that I'm doing is not so much making a decision, planning ahead. It's, you know, if the teacher is making a point like, hey, don't do this, make sure you don't do this, I try to listen to that advice, right? So obviously, to a certain extent, I'm still planning ahead, but I'm relying a lot more on the teacher to make sure that I don't end up really screwed up. And if the teacher's not capable of doing it, then I just accept that maybe I'll get really screwed up, and that's okay. Because your first game is an experimentation run. So your thinking should be kind of post-decision. That way you just do something, and you spend the next turn when you're seeing how it resolves, really unpacking what the repercussions were of the decision you made. And that way you're not front-loaded with your planning and things. You're more like just going to do something and then see, well, was that a good decision or not? Because that, to me, you know, trial and error is one of the best ways to learn. And from a teaching perspective, like, you have to be willing to make a mistake to be able to truly learn how to do something. If you don't, and you have the sort of, like, I don't want to do this wrong, you know, like, and to a certain extent, like, indecision is, I think, the sort of, it's like the sort of cardinal sin from which AP, which is like, you know, the actual committed sin. I think that indecision is where that springs from. And, you know, like, in a lot of ways, I think that getting all of the information is something that some players do so that they can put off that indecision that they're feeling. And this happens outside of board games. So this is like, what restaurant do we want to go eat at? Indecision strikes at your group, you know, and what game do we want to play? We're all terrible, except for Andy, who I still, like, Andy, you know what? I'm gonna, like, be reactive. When Andy puts out a game, I'm gonna be like, nope, put out my own game, because I'm gonna be like that is enough. Like, Andy gets his games played because he's one of the people who, like, when you're all standing around, he's just willing to, like, ignore, like, half of the people that are in the groups, like, desires of what they like to play, you know, like. So yeah, I'm gonna, like, do that myself sometime. Andy's gonna put something down, I'm just gonna slap a box on top of it and be like, nope.
Except what I do. It's a good game.
I didn't hear you there, Andy. You're coming in robotic, man. So whatever it is, where your hands are at, I couldn't hear what you said.
I said, yeah, but when I do it, it's a good game.
Oh, sure.
Oh.
No, actually, no. What seems to happen an awful lot is it's like me and Joe putting the games down, and then everybody ends up going in one of those two areas.
Yep, generally.
Yeah. Well, if I ask you and you're like, you know, would make your wishes known, I can help you. I can help select better. But game nights devolved into, like, going to my in-laws for dinner. We're like, what do you want? What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want? You know.
It's the Jungle Book.
Oh yeah, and then you get the lovely. Oh, I'm up for anything. Okay, let's do Chinese. Nah, I don't want Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get in that one pretty quick. What do you guys want? I don't know. Let's have pizza. I don't like pizza. Then you says something.
Yeah. That's like board games too, though. They do that. It's just like, I don't know, what are we gonna play? I don't know, I'm up for anything. Okay, let's play deck builders. I don't like deck builders. Okay, then shut up.
Well, it's like what Joe was saying. The first time you play a game, we're going to experiment with it a bit. I remember the first time me and Krista sat down with Paths of Glory. I'm like, I wonder if this thing accurately represents trench warfare. And so I just threw my Germans, like, completely over the line and attacked the French that were entrenched. Guess what? It simulated it very well. We had to start the game over because I had nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, some of the AP aspects come from people who want to be competitive at a difficult game the first time they play it.
Oh yeah, that'd be another pet peeve of mine is people who have to win the game no matter if it's their first game, last game, or 21st game, and if they don't win, they blame you for not teaching it right. Ah.
Yeah, just competitive. I mean, the competitive aspect, I would say, when somebody gets competitive and when somebody sort of like tanks or gives up, like this is me. For me, this is the thing that drives me crazy as a coach. Like currently I'm coaching tennis. It's one of the reasons you may have not hear from me all that much, and why I seem like I'm stressed out and just like very short with my responses. And probably you're getting more salt from me than you normally would, and I apologize for that. It's because I'm coaching a ton. And something I notice as a coach for young kids, you know, I've got developing kids, high school age kids, and they're playing a game of tennis where very frequently you will score 3 points in a game, your opponent will score 5, and then they get the point for that, and your 3 points just get erased. So there's a lot of having to bounce back. You have to be a rubber band mentally. And the same way, just in general, to be able to participate in the board gaming hobby, you have to have that sort of a mentality where, hey, I got trounced in this game. Who cares? Play the next game. Right. And it just isn't that big of a deal. There's a lot of people who just don't seem to care about winning. And I think that, like, you know, not caring or not investing at all is problematic, especially if you're just like sort of doing things willy-nilly. But when I see players that like sort of give up and start packing in, you know, like before anything has happened, like that can be a extremely frustrating situation for me, especially since most of the people that I play with are adults. And I don't want to see that from adults. I don't have as much patience for adults as I do for kids. So maybe that's what it comes down to. For me, like the thing that drives me crazy is that I expect more. I expect developed psychological responses from adults. And a lot of times that's not what I'm getting. And, you know, it makes it sound, you know, like I get this a ton, and it's not that frequent. But when it does happen, it drives me crazy, TC. And that's what you're wanting, right?
Oh, yeah. It's just like, oh, my.
You were saying that you thought you were going to find psychologically stable people in the gaming hobby.
Yeah, well, but I don't think that's an excuse, though. I think that honestly, like, because I think that you see that more. Like, Andy, you talk crap about sports people all the time, and you'd expect to see that more. But I'll tell you this, man, I see people that play a sport get back up after they've lost. And I see people, when they're playing games, I see people that keep coming back to games, and by the end of the game night, they're so frustrated, you know, they give up in a game, and they make the experience bad for everybody else. Like, how do you keep doing that? How do you keep showing up to a game night when so frequently it's ending bad when you're not winning?
Well, I don't understand the need to win all the time. I understand. I understand competitiveness, and I've definitely been in a situation where I've gotten skunked so bad in a game. I mean, like blood rage. I got lapped in blood rage, like in the second round, because I wasn't drafting my cards for crap. But I didn't check out. But man, I was just like, "Are you okay, TC? No, I just want to get through this game. Why? Because I want to play it again."
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't know. I'm not very competitive in game. Like, I'm competitive in that I'm trying to win, but I don't have a competitive spirit in the sense it's like I want to play the game well, but if I lose, it's like,
yeah, Andy, you seem to be more like you're happy when you win, but you're not upset when you lose. I've never seen you get upset at a loss. And that's like, that to me is the ideal psychological, like that's the ideal starting point. That's the ideal, like if I could coach that into you, that's what I would want. You know, I want to see you celebrate. I want to see you thrive on success, but I also don't want to see you, you know, so upset by failure that you can't continue on. You know, it's that ideal standing point. And I struggle with it myself, Andy. I'm more of a roller coaster of a person than you are, I think, just a bit.
Well, that's because I'm like just a hair shy of a Vulcan, but
more of a science guy than the humanities guy, which would be me. But yeah, I kind of wonder, you know, like to a certain extent, like that sort of competitive aspect. Like this is that venting time. So Trent, you said AP. TC, you said like people arguing details, semantics, in a frustrating sort of just serious dead tone. You messed up. I'm not going to let that slide sort of way. And I think that sort of like unwavering commitment to being like appropriate, you know, to a certain extent, that's almost like political correctness.
The word you're looking for is pedantic.
Pedantic. Yes, there
absolutely.
We go.
Great word. Mm-hmm. And that's not cool. For me, it's like, you know, as I said, that when people sort of start to get salty and it starts to sort of seep into the table. And it's something that I personally am not, you know, I am not immune to it either. So I understand the struggle. I really do. And that's why, like, I'm never going to write somebody off because this happens, but it is a behavior that I'm really against. So Andy, I'd also like to add to that, when people have robotic voices in podcasts, it really drives me crazy, and I can hardly hear what they're saying. It's just
I don't like gaming with androids.
Stuttering androids. I could have said tapping. Another thing that got me going was I went to an L5R tournament and I got accused of playing the meta. It's like, what's the meta? What are you talking about? It's like, well, it's a well-known fact if you play L5R and you do the dragon thing and you Voltron it. Not even know what Voltron was at that point. Like a Voltron, what's Voltroning? And then he described it. It's like, well, that's a Constructicon. That's not Voltron. That's a Constructicon where you make a bigger robot out of small robots. You're going to correct me. I'm going to correct you. That's the wrong terminology. So it's like, I've never been accused of playing the meta. It was the weirdest thing because I didn't even know what the heck this guy was talking about. Meta. Like, there's a meta? What's that? And that's when I went down the rabbit hole of finding out what tapping was. Yeah. Woo-hoo. Boy,
these are people. Hey, no, he goes, these are people in flashy costumes that combine well. It's clearly a Megazord. Megazord.
Yeah, it's like, is a Green Ranger involved here? I don't know. Exactly. It's like, I don't know, Voltron. I kind of like Voltron. It made their lion robots, right? And it was pretty cool. Is that meta? I don't know. Is making pop culture references meta? I don't get it, guys. Sorry. And he was losing. It was like one of the few games I actually won of L5R in that tournament. So I was actually feeling kind of good about myself. And I guess he wasn't taking it well, knowing that the guy who was sucking the most was actually beating him. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what people do.
Bring out the best and worst in people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what people do, though. They can't have it be their inadequacies. It has to be some sort of external factor. It's their opponent. It's some sort of element in game design. It's, like, it can never just be, I sucked. That was me. I can get better.
That happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you, Andy? Come on, I want to hear Mr. Roboto.
Yeah, try. See if you can switch where your hands are at or something, man. See if you can, because it's really hard to make out what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Is that any better?
No.
No.
Keep talking and moving things. Keep talking and doing things.
Keep talking. Moving. Duck and roll. Duck and roll.
This is Andy. He's turned off his video.
Mr. Roboto.
Okay, you got a list. I want to hear more. Come on.
Yeah, I feel like Andy would have the most of these. So if anybody, but maybe his robot
I don't like rage quitting, but that's only happened to me a few times.
Oh gosh, like rage quitting would be the like.
Hey, you and I witnessed what more or less amounts to a rage quit a few months ago on Sunday at Mayhem.
What game was that?
Rising Sun.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
What raged the guy out on this game? He didn't have the cool
he was getting frustrated near the end of it because things weren't going his way. Mm-hmm. He was just frustrated. But he basically rage quit on the game, and we're like, I guess we'll just finish this out and pretend he wasn't playing.
No, yeah, it was very awkward. It was a very difficult situation, and that's that's the type of situation that it happened a few months ago, but I remember that as well. And it's the big thing I'd like to emphasize here, that we're talking about behaviors, not people.
Yes.
Having a few discussions with people, that people a lot of times, if they're totally socially inept, if they're, I don't want to say inept, that's a mean word, that's a talking down word. If they are socially sort of impaired, maybe, where they don't actually sense emotions, a lot of times if you tell them, that helps them out. I mean, there are definitely folks where if you tell them like, hey, I felt upset when you do this, or the game was impacted by this, the whole group was very awkward, like that is not what that person wanted. But they're either so busy dealing with something that's in their head that they really can't get out of their own head. Like they don't understand that. So yeah, talking to somebody is a good way to get these things to change. So TC, if you really wanted Mr. You Can't Say Tap to not, impact you in this way, just saying like, dude, it is what it is. What I said, you understood what I said. So you just interrupted me when I was teaching you something, or were you teaching something, or were you saying what you were doing?
Well, I was just describing how I was playing, and I said, you tap the cards like this, and that's when he's like,
you say what you just did interrupted my train of thought when I'm trying to play a pretty involved game. And I think that's a little bit that's kind of playing, in a way, what you could say, TC, is that's playing the meta game that you're trying to sort of get in. He's trying to get into your head. And if that works for him and it worked for you, and he got into your head and he ended up like beating you and you ended up frustrated, then that's really kind of a dirty win. But that's also, you know, like, I mean, we're social beings, and anytime you sit down at a game, there is that social contract, but people push rules, people push boundaries. That's what people do. So, I mean,
that's fine. I don't spend $80 on a card, but hey, that's just me. You know? Yeah, it's I had to put on a good face because my daughter was there. But you know what? His opinion. If he doesn't want to play it, that's fine. If you know, it just reminds me, like, I'm really glad I don't play Magic the Gathering anymore. That's great. Speaking of rage quitting, we had someone rage quit Thunder Alley because we were in the middle of we were doing a season. And this guy just rage quit out. He just completely checked out, went on Board Game Geek, rated the game a 1, gave a full description of the game, and never came back. And the way we dealt with it was that the cup you won at the end of the season was a memorial cup, and we named it in his honor. But yeah, right there, 1. Board Game Geek 1. Like, wow, thanks. That's great.
And that, to me, that's, you know, if anybody wants to take like that review seriously, that you just, you know, that's a contaminated review. That's absolutely a contaminated review. Like that, you know, if you're going to let yourself get that emotional, I mean, it's one thing when you disconnect from a game and you're like, hey, can we stop playing this? I just really don't think this is a game for me. Like, you know, but when you're doing that like at that point you're on tilt. Your brain is not even thinking correctly. At that point, you just need some time and you need some space. Like not go on there and just enact all your frustrations out on the world. That's, yeah. So
it wasn't okay that I reviewed Firefly by saying it improved roll and move to move and roll.
No, that's fine, Andy. Like you didn't, like you made it through that game. That's totally cool. And by the way, you just sound beautifully clear right now. So whatever you've done, thank you.
I think when someone moved my mic, they turned the gain up too high. So
okay. Well, yeah, no, it sounds great now. Yeah, and it like just once again, you know, we are playing with people, and the people are capable of changing. The behavior is still going to be the behavior, though, and we can still say what we want to about the behavior. But you know, it's also to a certain extent, it's our responsibility as folks that understand, you know, like or are bothered by things, you know, to sort of be the, you know, to sort of voice things, to be the one who actually says like, hey, this upset me. Or, hey, this was a behavior that impacted the game in a negative way. And, you know, and a lot of times if you start that conversation, if you are scared of starting that conversation, the question, the magic question, the magic words, I'll give these to you free of charge, is get that person aside and ask them, hey, is everything okay? Because at that point, you have just sent a message to that person that their behavior has sent a red flag to you that they're not doing well. That whatever it is, it's negatively impacting things, and you're worried about them. Because at that point, you know, it could feel like they feel antagonized by other players at the table. They feel antagonized by the mood of the table. They feel like maybe other players at the table are getting humor at their expense, or other players are getting, you know, they're getting a victory at their expense, and they're really upset by that. Now, to a certain extent, you have to learn to deal with some of these things, right? And if they're not there, they need our help. And that's why when you ask is everything okay, it can really help diffuse a situation. I use that as a
the principal's office.
Well, Andy doesn't teach real people. He teaches middle schoolers. I teach high schoolers, so they are real people. So I have to treat them as such.
What, they're closer to real people? Okay.
Oh, come on. And the thing is, like, a lot of times you end up figuring out more about that person, and they end up, like, you know, like you end up actually developing a friend out of a frustrating situation, and now they understand that not only is their behavior something they're being held accountable for, but also there was somebody that they don't want to displease. You know, it starts being something where like these types of behaviors we're talking about are turned up to 11 in an online competitive environment. You know, like any negative behavior that I could come up with in board games is 50 times worse when I play with randos online that are shouting into their mics. They're saying racist things. They're saying homophobic things. They're saying things that are just obnoxious. And you know, like this isn't every interaction, because not everybody that plays online is like that. But it is just rampant. And the people that do it without any sort of consequences. And so when you say, is everything okay, you're making it so that there's consequences. They understand there's consequences, but you don't need to enforce any, because really deep down, people understand, and people understand, right. Like, go ahead, Trent. Yeah, you go ahead.
He was running around earlier.
Uh-oh. Trent has Trent here. Let's.
Trent has children issues.
Yeah, Trent has children issues. Let's see. I'll make a little timestamp. But yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, like, hopefully that bit of advice will help you being able to, you know, make sure that you're playing with other people, that the people, you're able to keep those people in your group. Because what ends up happening is you end up with a player who has a behavior that nobody wants to play with. And that player ends up being passive aggressively avoided by other players in your game group. And they don't know why. They just feel like everybody hates them. And in a certain way, everybody does hate something about them, but they might not understand that, right? If they push back against you, then you might just need to say, like, well, hey, it's probably best if you specifically play with people that are okay with this behavior. You know, for example, like if somebody really thinks that you know, for a lot of people, like the way that they process information, the way that they accept, like a lot of the people that AP don't complain about AP because to them, they're willing to wait because that's just something that they, you know, like that's the way that their brain processes. They're okay with waiting because they respect that it's your call and they're not going to push you through that. When you push them through that, it upsets them sometimes. So yes, there is a certain amount of maybe compatibility that you need to figure out, but it doesn't mean you can't still enjoy a person's company. You know, it's just that, like, maybe you want to avoid certain games with somebody, right? Like, when it comes down to it, a lot of people have negative behaviors. I have negative behaviors. I wouldn't have ever been able to get better had there not been people who actually spoke to me about them. So, yes, write to me with all of the negative behaviors I have and tell me how much of a terrible person I am. It builds character.
No. Yeah, and I needed to buy a new hard drive for that list.
You're gonna run out of running out. I mean, how about we got a 4 terabyte hard drive now and still just?
No, we're only past the 2 terabyte. The 3 should be fine.
Okay, all right. Getting the 3rd should be all right. The 2 terabytes of the text document. Yep.
Joe hates fun.
This is right. Yep.
I think the one thing that gets to me is how do I say this without being a butt?
Oh, no, don't worry, be a butt.
Just say it, Andy.
I encourage buttness.
This is the board game burnout. This is the things that drive us crazy. Come on, rant, but
for
consequences.
Me, I think it's more along the lines of like intellectual laziness or not putting the effort in to recompense people for wanting to spend time. And so what I mean by that is I like to think as like the person who often plays very eclectic, heavy games, that I work very, very hard to make sure that the first play of a game I give people is the best experience possible. Does that mean I get everything right? No, I make mistakes here and there. But like, I always try to make sure I know a game pretty thoroughly before I set people down to do it. And I really kind of expect that courtesy out of people back at me because I value my time and I know other people value their time. And it drives me nuts when people, you know, are trying to teach you a game or you're trying to figure out a game and it's like obvious this is the first time they've ever really opened the rule book or they've never done a sample turn with it or have an idea of the flow of the game. That kind of thing just drives me up a wall. The one that's really been bothering me, sort of related to that as well, is the kind of questions that people ask on rules forums that are like obvious in the notebook or obvious in the rule book. And now I try to give a certain leeway to that in the sense that, okay, well, maybe there's people that have reading disorders and they have issues with that. But, you know, I am 99.9% likely have dyslexia. I can still deal with the rule book to figure out how to do things. And I understand when people ask for edge cases, like, well, if this weird situation happens, how do you deal with that? That's where the forums are. But for example, I saw one today, which was, oh, how many turns does John Company last? I'm like, it's like in the first 5 pages for crying out loud. I'm like, did you not bother to even open that thing? And I think, you know, it just comes from maybe my experience growing up in gaming, like more of the video game world, where when I was growing up, you actually had a manual you had to read. It wasn't this lovely little tutorial that walked you through everything. I don't know. It just feels like I can't be bothered to do my homework to make you have a good time when you're giving of your time to sit down and play this game I brought. That just, I don't know. That just frustrates me because I guess for me, I try really hard to never be that guy. Like, I want to come in with a game, even if I'm learning it for the first time, and I want people to have as good of an experience as they can. And that hopefully the effort I put through with it shines through, even if I don't get everything right, that, hey, at least I tried to really do the best job I could to have us all have a good time around this game. But I don't know, I just don't get that. And I see it. I've seen it for several years in students, and I know my wife will even run across it in a college student occasionally where, they'll be reading something like, well, I don't know what this word means. And you're like, okay, Google, dictionary. And they're just like, yeah, I'll just get it. I'm like, that's just intellectual laziness. Mm-hmm. And it just really bugs me.
Well, Andy, the thing is, like, you're right about Google. And to a certain extent, like, I understand that, like, you didn't want to come off like, really like bullish or, like somebody who's unwilling to compromise. I understand that. And I think maybe to a certain extent, my answer to you is my way of saying one of my sort of pet peeves or things that drive me crazy is consistent negativity about anything, like just like, because what you said towards the end there really made me think, like, that's what I get. That's where I really want to go with this, Andy, is that, like, you take all this time and you do all this stuff and people recognize that. People recognize and appreciate that. And it's positive experiences like that make you able to keep people coming back to learn games with you. Like, people trust you. And the thing is, like, if somebody doesn't have my trust playing a game with them, like, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but really, when somebody doesn't know a game very well, that's okay. Like, not everybody knows their game super well, but if they're pushing it to play it, and I've got all these other games, if they just want, like, warm bodies to sit there while they read the rules and figure it out, like, that's not cool, right? So, like, right. I'm mixing together, like, what you're saying, but then, like, also, like, just somebody who's pushy about their games, that's dangerous. Like, if you're pushy about your games and you're like Andy, where you know them back to front, like, that's okay. Like, you can push those games because you know them, and you're like, you actually have, like, sort of them close to your heart memorized, and you have positive, you've got, like, a resume going into it where you've had many positive experiences with other games in similar situations. And just, Andy, also your kind of experience with a hobby is a bit lopsided, favoring the time that you get to spend preparing versus the time that you actually spend playing. So I think that's one of the reasons that you're so thorough, but not everybody is like that. I myself don't have that same sort of, like, for me, the balancing, like, sometimes I need to just fumble through a game. And one of the things I tell players is, like, this is a learning game. Don't take it seriously. Hey, learning game, not a big deal. Like, if you're ever doing well as a teacher in a learning game, just say this to your table. Hey, sometimes a blind squirrel finds a nut. And that's what you should be thinking in any time when you're learning a game. If you're winning a learning game, don't be sitting there like, hey, I'm winning. It's no, sometimes a blind squirrel finds a nut. That's it, right? Like, it is just, just go with it and roll with it.
I mean, related to that, I mean, I have a leg up in the sense that I'm also an educator. So teaching comes naturally to me where it may not to other people. But even then, you can still get a feeling of maybe this person isn't the best at conveying information, but you can tell they thought about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Well, I think
mean? What you probably get, Andy, and I kind of stopped subscribing. Do you subscribe to games on Board Game Geek?
Mostly only games I'm following that haven't come out.
Back to Robot, man. You're back to Robot.
No, I don't know. No, mostly only the only time I do that is, like, games that haven't come out yet that I'm interested in. But I, like, subscribe to a couple different groups where this stuff crops up and just kind of sneaks its way in.
Yeah, well, I think that, Andy, when people ask a question in a rules forum, I mean, you can just ignore that. Like, and I know that's what you probably do, but, like, it's just kind of like a little bit of your time's waste, and you're like, this is so obvious. Well, you know what? Sometimes, it just, things escape you, right? Like, I know that there's people who have played one of their favorite games wrong forever. Like, maybe somebody who helped in the developing and playtesting of Terraforming Mars, who played a rule wrong for the entirety of their, like, 100+ plays, and then did a long view episode with this rule still wrong. And yes, of course, I'm talking about Jeff Gamble, who may or may not
Terraforming Mars.
Yeah. But he's like, you know, sometimes you just, the way that I'd like to say to respond to that, Andy, is you know the phrase, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I understand like that it's like sort of something you're going to say like during the moment, dude. Andy, you're the sweetest guy. You're way nicer than I am in person. So you'd never say or do anything that would make somebody feel unwelcome, you know, or make somebody feel like that was a dumb question. You just lost some of my patience. Shut up and stop asking dumb questions. Like, but I understand like it's sort of more like that it sort of builds and then you've answered enough dumb questions and it's frustrating and you feel like I already do this at my job. No, I get it, dude. So yeah, I can get that like sort of not being prepared, that intellectual laziness, not really wanting to put in work. Everybody games for a different reason though, Andy. And that's why a lot of times like people are not playing games for the same reason you are, to sort of find this sort of crunchy, masochistic, oh, do the numbers, do they hurt? How does it feel? Like you've been abused by a math book. Like that's, you know, that's not everybody plays games for that same reason. And so like, I know that for you to get to that point, you kind of need to be playing at a table of players that at least understand that that's what they're in for. But like a lot of people, you know, like that's, you know, they might give a game a shot, and they might give a shot because of how they feel about you, because it's about like playing the people and not just the games.
Well, and that's also another thing I try to do as a common courtesy to people is I try to make sure I explained a game a little bit before I get them there. So, for example, you know, I hope when I give a description of a game I'm wanting to play, and this sounds horrible, but it's not the way I mean it, that it chases off the people that need to chase it off, and it brings in the people that it should bring in the sense of if I have someone new, I don't know what their tastes are. You know, I'm like, well, I was wanting to play this game, but where's your comfort level with games? Do you like math games? Do you like games where you can be really mean to each other, negotiate? You know, I try to do that to lower those bad experiences, because there is nothing worse than getting stuck in a game that you just absolutely dislike, and then just having to sit through it. And so I do my best to try to avoid that situation. I guess for my issue is when it comes down to intellectual laziness and just kind of that kind of, I think probably the reason it affects me the way it does is me personally, I put a very high value on my time. Mm-hmm. It's very limited into what I can put it into based on all of the commitments in my life. And so I try to do my dangest to value other people's time to the same degree. And I guess when people don't come prepared, or they're like reading the rules and trying to teach it, it's just like, you're not valuing my time. Mm-hmm. That's how it makes me feel. But yeah, that can fully be a me thing. Like,
no, I get it. So I guess while you were saying that, Andy, and I know that this is going to further flesh out like that sort of the sort of resistance I'm feeling just to the idea of like, you know, kind of ranting and complaining is specifically this. When something goes well, like it was mentioned in our comments by David here in our local group, at least for the time being, tear rolls down my cheek, that we had a game of Twilight Imperium 4 with like 4 or 5 new players, but everybody had watched videos or read the rules, so that like it was super, super smooth. It was awesome. It was a great experience. It was just like, you know, it was just packed full of, you know, the actual game and the decisions we got to make and experience and the stories we could tell, and not, you know, like fumbling through rules and frustrated. Like it was really awesome. And so like my big thing is when something good happens, focus on that. If you have a good experience, thank them for that. And you know what? If you've ever heard me like say that, like, you know, hey, thanks for doing that, I hope that has been taken as it should, because like, honestly, I could focus on the negative. I could focus on like, you know, like something happened and just be like, hey, this was wrong. And I still have people that I deal with on a daily basis, both in my job and in the gaming hobby, that tend to only operate on when something goes bad, you fix it. And that's it. It's never like this holistic approach where you're actually sort of cultivating gamers into people that are going to be, you know, great members of your group that are going to then that's just going to spread more. Sort of just a growth mindset that way. And I think that, you know, focusing on when you have positive experiences, if a game gets done and it was a really positive experience for you, I urge you, tell people about it. You know, like, hey, thank people for the game. That's something that I've been telling to my tennis players. They all play Fortnite, and I'm like, hey guys, I got homework for you. I want you to, when you get done with a game of Fortnite, I want you to, as soon as you die, you know, and unless you win, if you win, you know, like, appreciate it and go your separate ways. But once you die, thank the rest of the players for the game. And I know that's really dumb because, like, in Fortnite, people don't even really talk to each other. So it's really dumb. But, like, if you say thanks for the game, like, people have said that to me in games of Through the Ages, and they've said it, like, that almost always happens when the game is going against somebody and they can see that they're not going to win. They're like, hey, thanks for the game. That to me is, like, that is so cool. Like, that is just something that really impresses me and makes me really want to play with that person more. So thank people for the game. Mention the positive. Focus on that. Because then that'll be what you notice. It'll be what you're looking forward to. And that way, when something negative happens, you can try to find a way to positively fix it instead of stop doing this. Instead of making a set of rules that say don't. Because that's just not how people actually get change. That's not how they work. They'll find ways around them.
Let's get the shop colors on.
Yeah. I didn't even hear what you said, Andy. It was too robotic.
Shot colors.
Oh, shot colors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, does anybody have any final thoughts here about this great little rant heavy? But I understand what you're saying, TC. Totally get it.
Oh yeah. I just like to close out saying, like, I've had too many games of Rex go south for that to affect the enjoyment of the game. In fact, some of the more epic game sections of Rex is when I get yelled at for not teaching the rules right. So every time I play a game of Rex, I always have a disclaimer saying, okay, this isn't your typical safe Euro ice game. We're just going to do what you're going to do and everybody else is not going to mess with you. This is a game where your choices have consequences and you're going to get nuked and it's going to be a lot of fun. If you can't handle that, then you need to, like, just not even get involved in this thing. But since I'm such a charismatic person and I tell such awesome stories about this game, usually we can get over that hump. That being said, I've had some really bad experiences of that game that have not affected my enjoyment of it. In fact, they've actually kind of made them more epic-y. So don't, I hear what you're saying, Joe. We're like, talk to the person, get them going. But, there are a lot of times you got to realize that, hey, it's just the person and maybe you just need to cut them loose.
This is true. Not everybody is worth it. Not everybody is worth it. And really, like, I've had to make that decision as well, TC. So it's just, you're right. Like, it is not, a lot of times it's just not worth your time. And that's definitely a decision that I've had to make in the recent past too. And that, it hurts because I just had that mindset that, like, it's behaviors that I'm frustrated by. It's not people. And so I don't, like, have people that I dislike. I just, like, when somebody stops spending time with me or something, like, I just kind of think, like, oh, that's kind of sad. I wonder what happened, and so, I mean, I generally find that, like, people will be repulsed by me before I will give up on them. They'll kind of give up on me, but, occasionally I've had to do that as well. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And then on the converse side, there's been people who've played with me, like, after playing an experience like that, are like, oh my God, that was like the most awesome thing. Man, I just nuked myself out of existence and it was hilarious. And we all laughed and had a good time. And, I just bit it in the biggest way possible. And, I really didn't enjoy the game, TC, but I enjoyed playing it with you. So anytime you want to play something that crazy again, just let me know. I'm in. And I've always said for the longest time, if you want to judge someone to see if you really want to play with you or not, break out Munchkin.
Ugh.
And if you can get someone to sit through Munchkin, say, TC, I hated that game, but I enjoyed playing that game with you, then you got a good person who's going to sit with you through any type of game you can throw at them.
TC, the premise of that challenge just seems terrible. It's like you're going to force somebody into a game you dislike and know that they'll dislike so they can prove yourself. This sounds like something that you would do to somebody who you're, like, in a relationship with. It's like, I want to see if they really love me.
Well, yeah, I got Carissa. I didn't make it easy for her either.
It'll be like, that's all going to be about gamers.
I mean, it's all relative, but I've found that even though it's a crap game, people around the table can make it enjoyable, and those are the type of people you want to have around the table with you more often than not.
Sure. The biggest thing to me, and I just don't know how to do anything about this. The biggest thing that breaks my heart and drives me crazy, and I just can't seem to do anything about it is the people that don't come back.
Mm.
You know, you try so hard, and I feel like I've already developed, you know, like sort of like, you know, I maybe played games that weren't in my wheelhouse so that I could try to just, you know, like I saw somebody there that I wanted to keep coming and wanted to become a bigger part of the group. And then, you know, obviously a lot of times things happen that are outside of their control, or it's just they were just trying it out and it isn't for them. But a lot of times that just, you know, that's what breaks my heart, and something that I don't think I'll ever quite come to terms with is every time that I feel like somebody had a great time and then I never saw them again.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the hard aspects of life in general. I mean, a lot of the mental health stuff I've dealt with over the last few years, it's basically been training of, you know, the training basically involves you can't control the other person. You can only control your reaction to them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a really tough thing to get your head around.
Oh yeah.
It's taken me years to get to that.
But this is like ghosting though, Andy. It's like I'm not even reacting to them. It's just that they're not there. And then I don't really start to think about this. Usually I focus on the positives, right? I see like these are all the people that are coming back. These are all the people that are a part of this. But then like when a day goes by, that's kind of like an off day, not many people showed up, I start thinking back on, you know, like, man, what happened to that person? What happened to that person? And that's when it starts to get to me. And I know that's not a healthy thing to do, and I try to avoid it. But yeah, as long as there's enough things that are in the close periphery, then those bigger things, you know, that can cause like sadness or cause some sort of, you know, feeling of, you know, unsettling, troubling things can kind of melt away.
And there's also good people I've played with that I've never seen again. It's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
But you know, it's funny. You kind of remember the bad people a lot more than you do the good.
That's natural tendency, though.
Ooh, I remember that guy. Ooh, I remember that. Oh, he was fine. But that guy.
Yeah.
It always makes me wonder, like, and Paul said this here in our chat, like, was it my fault? Am I the reason they're not coming back? And I think I can point at a few people that, you know, like if somebody keeps playing in your group and then seems to just avoid you like the plague, that's pretty clear that you're the reason that they don't play as many games, or you're the reason. Like, I think there's definitely some times when I've noticed that, and I understand that, and that also kind of hurts. But it's like, whatever, just focus on the positive. You're not going to change the past. You're not going to change the person, especially if they won't have any interaction with you. So yeah, you got to accept what you can't change. And I think, TC, that's also a really good point that you brought up.
Or just recognize there's different people, and different people like different things. There's a fair amount of people in our local game group that I don't play with on a regular basis, not because they're not nice people or anything. We just like different experiences in our gaming.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
There's nothing wrong with that, you know. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, just be cognizant of that. And I think the best thing to do in those situations of frustration or good or whatever is just be open and honest as you can. You still can't control how they're going to react to you, but you can at least say, you know, hey, I was forthright with you. You know, as you were saying, you know, for me, it might be a situation where it's like, hey, let's play a trivia game. Let's get everybody. I'm like, no, I'm not into that, man. I'm sorry. I'm like, they just really frustrate me. You know, you seem like great people, but if you want to play something else, maybe I can do that. Me and trivia games don't get along, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. You don't have to necessarily torture yourself for somebody else's good time, but I don't expect that among other people either. Like, I don't want someone to sit down to a game of John Company who's not going to be
invested
or happy about being there.
For sure.
And Joe, it also helps. This always helps me. I've come to realize in my life that I'm always in trouble. I'm in a perpetual state of trouble. I just don't know what it is from day to day. So whenever it's like, oh, that's it. Okay, well, I knew I was in trouble. I just didn't know it was that. You know, it brings your stress level down. It's good for your blood pressure, and it helps you accept who you are.
I hope that you're still able to take things seriously, though, TC, because I understand that, like, the thing is, like, when you've been complained at so much, yeah, at that point, it's just like you're impervious to it, basically. Like, when somebody yells at you, it's like, I don't care. You know, it's like, I've been yelled at before. What are you going to do?
Well, I've also been married for, 25 years now. But do you listen to what I said? Huh? Oh, were you talking? Okay, sorry. And we didn't even get to half this stuff on my list. Wanted to talk about Kickstarter nonsense, weird rules that make no sense in games, like how can you train with Yoda on Dagobah when I just blew up Dagobah with the Death Star? Why do I have a giant mech that can't cross water and Scythe? People who play the game twice and say the game's broken. That drives me up the wall. maybe we should have a part 2. I got a list
space on that one.
Yeah. Well, my favorite thing with the people who play the game twice and say the game is broken is like people take a guitar lesson twice and say the guitar's broken. When I see David Gilmour ripping it up on Pink Floyd, I'm like, he doesn't seem to have a problem with the guitar. I don't know what your problem was, but clearly the guitar's not broken.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe we'll go do a part 2. But yeah,
if you want to keep rattling them off, go with them. I'll let you decide, dude.
Oh yeah, I think the Kickstarter thing just makes me feel old because I don't understand how people can pay like hundreds of dollars for something that doesn't even exist yet. When I give money, I like to get something in return. And then plus the hype on Kickstarter games, usually it's completely over and done by the time the game gets out, if it comes out, when it comes out. And if you like the game, too bad on trying to get it because you already missed your window of opportunity.
Well, that's what they talk about. Like, this is something I've been like trying to disengage myself with. And it kind of annoys me about the hobby in a way, but it's kind of a good problem, and it's a me thing. It's like the cult of the new thing, where it's just like, here's a new game, here's a new game, here's a new game.
Well, the Kickstarter takes it to a whole new level. It's like, it's not even new. It doesn't exist.
That's what they said. They're now not the cult of the new, but the cult of the yet to be.
Yeah, the cult of the
future.
Yeah, I swear, like the hype for Rising Sun was already done before the game even came out, right? It's like, wow.
Well, no, that's what the people who get a lot of their games on Kickstarter do. They like to be part of that development more than I think the actual game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they get it. They're like, oh yeah, I got it.
Well, here's the thing. I would push back because a lot of people, and Andy, game companies you like go to Kickstarter, and it's because there's an initial investment. There's a lot of risk. Kickstarter helps take away the risk. So I see from a publisher's perspective why it works.
Oh, no.
Here's another reason that it works from a publisher's perspective. First of all, you're getting that money up front, but then when the game finally releases, like actually getting that game in front of other people is the best marketing you can do. And so you're taking a product, you're already making money for it, and now you're putting legs on it because 6 months down the road, that game everybody talked about, now it's out. And now it gets this huge buzz again, and now it can just keep going. And you have another Kickstarter campaign that then puts it in more people's hands. And it's just as like this sort of like, it goes down, and it has like that sort of a function. But TC, like, I grew up in I would say about 12 years old is probably how old I was when I won my first eBay auction. And I didn't have anything in my hand for like another 12 days. And I can remember that anticipation of checking the mail and all those things. And like that type of stuff just doesn't bother me all that much. I mean, honestly, here's what I think though, TC. I think that ultimately it ends up with games that are being sold on how flashy they are and not on how actually well they play. And that I'm totally behind with you. And that Kickstarter is frustrating because you end up with a bunch of crappy, or not even crappy, but just mildly amusing games that don't have all that interesting of a central concept, but people get really, really into them because it looks cool.
And it's like okay, that's a cool game. Maybe I want to get this. Oh, you can't get it now because this was all Kickstarter exclusive stuff. Cool pieces. I'm like, well, heck with that. I'll just play your game. Or whenever you buy your next new game, let me know and I'll buy that off of you. It's like, and then going to someone's house and seeing all these games still in shrink. Oh, I didn't know that game came in. I forgot I got that. How can you forget you bought something? Dude, I know everything I've got because I invest in it and I know it's coming. I got people who like get games and they just put them on the shelf still in shrink. Well, I got that. I'll just whatever. I'm gonna look at the next thing and do it. And really, holy cow! That looks like a cool game. Let's play it. It's shrink. It's lonely. It wants to come out and play.
Yeah, but the most expensive mile you put on a car is when you drive it off the lot.
Oh yeah, that's the value happens too. It's like it immediately goes down $10,000 as soon as you go right off the lot.
You take that shrink off, man, and it's no longer a new game. It doesn't matter if you actually play it or not. So yeah.
Well, I know so many people have GMT games and Shrink, and I just feel so sad for them. I feel sad for the game. I'm like, oh, bring it out and love it, please. Andy, you make them. You make them, okay?
No, that's the thing I think that I'm frustrated by in the gaming hobby, and this is almost totally a me thing, really, but it's just the sheer amount, and it all looks awesome, and you really want it all. There's no way in hell you're ever going to, people are like, some people are like, well, I gotta save this so it'll hold up overthrow for the next 20 plays. I'm like, you're never gonna play that 20 times.
I know. I bring up my copy of Rex, and people are like, "Oh my god, it looks like a dog chewed on it." It's like, yes, I play the game.
I agree. Like, to me, there's a beauty in worn games, and but not everybody thinks like I do.
They don't. But I'm just saying, there really is just a glut of games. There's so many coming out that you can't.
But then I've also played. I once played at the. I used to do a public game night at the library here in town, and there was a guy who brought his own games, and he really pushed them hard. He pushed them, wanted to play them, and one of the games that he wanted to play was like a roll and move that was kind of a pick up and deliver from like the 80s, and he had played this game so much that he had gone through the original card deck that came with the game and had remade the card deck using just a standard deck of cards and had just like crossed out all the hearts and stuff and had just written on the card what a card was supposed to do. And that was almost unplayable because the cards were so bent and so worn. And I mean, there was that level to which, like, I can't imagine that guy still played that game. It was, first of all, I didn't like the game and that didn't help. But then it was like, that game was in such bad condition that it was basically unplayable. You could tell almost every card in the deck, if you really looked hard enough at the back of it, every one of them had unique patterns of wear. So anyway, does anybody have any final things here? Trent, what pet peeve, anything else you've been holding in?
I don't like badly written rule books. I hate badly written rule books just with a passion. I don't like people who like basically just get like I kind of mentioned this earlier, not about rage quitting. I just don't like people quitting mid-game in general. I mean, even if it's, I have some sympathy for emergencies, but I feel like you're being really disrespectful to everyone else at the table if you just get up and like, see ya. I don't, I really struggle with that even in the event of an emergency. Because I feel like, everybody at this table besides that person just wasted their time.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, let's go ahead. Thanks so much, Trent, for sharing those things. I think that we're getting here towards close to the end, and it looks like somebody may have just rage quit this podcast. Yeah, Andy rage quit earlier, and now TC's rage quitting. Actually, no, these are certainly things that have some sort of a reason behind them. But let's go ahead and move into our hype here. That was our topic, things that Board Game Burnout, things that are driving us crazy. And we are now going to start with, hey, TC, Trent was just saying how much he hates when people rage quit.
that was the computer raging. I just got this. It says, your batteries run out of juice. Oh, shit, guys, I got to go.
Oh,
we got back.
All right, well, thanks, TC. So TC's here, and we're moving into our hype section. So nice. Trent had a list of things that were very that I agreed with pretty much everything on his list, like across the board. So now we're going to talk about hype, and we're going to start with Trent. Why don't you go ahead and hype something that I think TC told us a little bit about, but this is like a 2-player sort of a coin game follow-up?
I don't know that it's a coin game, but it's definitely a follow-up from the designer. It's like a new system from the designer of the coin games. And I mean, that alone, and the game's called Nevsky, that alone has got me interested in wanting to play it. To the point where, on the reputation of coin games and Labyrinth alone, I put it on my P500 list. I honestly don't know that much about it. I've read there isn't a whole ton available online. I think a lot of the P500 is kind of based on his reputation and word of mouth in the wargaming community. But honestly, I love the coin series so much that that's enough for me. So I'm on board.
Yeah, this is the first in a series called the Levy and Campaign series. From what I understand, it's like the political and military simulation of what, 1240 Russia.
Yeah, it's
I
like
think.
a weird setting. Yeah, I don't know much about the historical period at all. Yeah, it's like it's about 1240 Russia, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's it's like the mid 13th century, I believe. But yeah, the fact that this is a new design from Volko, who did the coin series, and it's about a time period I'm not even familiar with, so it'll be great just playing a game and learning the history. Yeah, I'm with you. I just went bam, and I know for a fact it's made its P500, so it's incoming. So yay!
All right, well, that was Nevsky. Thanks, Trent and TC. And now let's go ahead and hear from you, TC, about the now we're talking coin.
Yeah, so there is going to be, they're calling it Coin Fest on GMT, where they're going to reprint all the coin games, and I don't recall what date that is. I want to say it's summer sometime, but along with reprinting July. Yeah. But along with reprinting all the coin games, they're going to be doing upgrade kits to all the previous coin games, at least a few of them. Fire in the Lake's getting one. Cuba Libre's getting one. Andean Abyss is getting one, and A Distant Plane. And I think Cuba Libre and A Distant Plane are one upgrade kit. But it doesn't matter because I just hit pre-order. I just P500 all of them.
Yeah, me too. Boom, 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 boom.
They're doing the I think they're doing the upgrades because they were doing something like the Falling Sky expansion comes out then, and it's gonna have upgraded player boards and stuff. So someone must have asked, like, "Hey, can we get this for the other games too?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, we'll make money on that."
Yeah, I know that. Like for Andean Abyss, like a lot of the upgrades came in their magazine, the C3SI magazine, and I've got most of them. I know that Mark Herman is always upgrading his games and making tweaks on them. So I know Fire in the Sky, Fire in the Lake is getting a significant upgrade, and there have been little changes to Cuba Libre and a Falling Sky, A Distant Plane, both of those. So yeah, I just like, instead of like running down all the expansions that were in the 3CSI magazine, I'm like, heck with it, I'm just gonna just get all of them, and I've played them enough anyway. I'm really curious to see what changes they're going to be making to Andean Abyss, since that was their first one. I know there's like shorter game variants in there, and yeah, it's just bam. It doesn't matter. They're incoming.
Okie dokie, yeah, all kinds of coin stuff coming in. It sounds like
coin goodness.
Let's keep it going.
All right, next up, Andy. Try if you could to fix that robot voice.
I don't know.
Just say no.
Because I think I'm gonna have to edit. I mean, I'm gonna let you go, but I'm probably gonna have to just take some of your stuff out, dude.
No.
Okay. Make him sound like Megatron.
Time of Crisis expansion. Buy it.
I don't mean to tell you can't say anything, dude. I just I have a hard time hearing what you're saying myself.
I'll talk about the Time of Crisis expansion. I have looked into it. It looks very exciting. You're going to get more cards to play with, but more importantly, you're going to be able, if you're the Emperor, you're going to be able to get out on the board and start messing with people. That is the single most exciting thing to that game that's going to add. And it's supposed to add a solitaire variant as well.
Bots. They're going to make bots.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're making coin-style bots from what I heard.
Yeah. Just being the Emperor and able to go out on the board is going to be incredible. I'm going to be out there like, I'm Emperor TC. Yeah, it's going to be cool.
Everything about it sounds great. More deck building options is going to be great. I'm looking forward to the solo bots just to play around with them. It's going to be great. It's all over. Why is GMT taking all of our money?
Because they're cool.
Because they're still doing new and interesting things.
So let's hear Joe's hype of GMT. Oh
wait. I think he's the odd man out. Oh, Joe, do you need a hug? Do you need a hug, Joe?
All right, for my hype, everybody put on your blackout goggles, or just put on your blackout earphones and don't listen to anything anybody else is saying, because I'm talking about a game that to me is really blown my mind just to consider this. It is a horror game called Nyctophobia. Which fortunately is described in the game description. Nyctophobia means fear of the dark. And so you play this game with one player that can see and is playing like they're two different evil masterminds. One of them is like an axe murderer, and the other one is a mage. And so what the players are doing is playing against this player, and they're trying to use touch to find their way sort of out of like what seems to be like a maze. And so it's very tactile components. This is a really fascinating design, in my opinion, and something that I've never seen tried before, and something you can only do in a physical game. It kind of reminds me of the app that came out that was called like Papa Sangre or something like that, where it was you had to play with headphones. You couldn't play it with like a crappy speaker because the game had no graphics. It was entirely sound based, and it was like
I played the sci-fi version of that. Yeah,
Andy, your voice is perfect. It's beautiful. It is not robotic at all. Thank you. But yeah, now that the sound, now that we're talking about the sound, yeah. What did you think of that sci-fi version of it? Was it kind of a cool, like, it was conceptually, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, it was kind of, I don't know. After a bit, I felt it was kind of gimmicky, but that's probably also because, like, I don't know, my ability to tell direction of sound is not great. So I like that when I got to the level where I kept like falling in the water and the monster eating me, like, yeah, screw this.
Like the limitations can end up feeling like frustration. So there's definitely going to be things that, like by taking sight away from people, it's going to be really interesting. Now, on the positive side, though, from what I know, and they're not marketing this way, so it's totally okay. And as a third party, I feel I can say this, but like for once, people that like, have struggled, people that maybe have sight problems are going to play a game and be able to get 100% of the experience of people that have sight. So I think that's going to be really cool just to to see it from that perspective. But obviously gameplay is what's going to really sell this one to me. I just the idea of being sort of like scared, honestly, I just don't want them to like hurt me while I'm wearing this thing, like taking my sight away makes me paranoid. So it's like a scary game, so that's what it's supposed to do. So that's like really cool.
And it'll be colorblind friendly.
Yeah, that's right. That too. Yep. Well, that's Nyctophobia. That's what I'm hyping. I'm really looking forward to getting to try this one out. Anyway, thank you very much, listeners. Also, Trent, Andy, TC, a very interesting array of topics that drive us all crazy. In a way, I feel somehow less crazy now that we've talked about a lot of these things. I hope that you guys can kind of share in that sentiment. But anyway, thanks for being here, guys.
I am an infinite well of crazy.
Thanks for letting me get off my chest.
Therapy hour.
Bye. All right. Well, y'all have a great week of gaming and catch us next week on the good, the bored, and the ugly.
Hey, Trent.